Hari Om. Today we will be completing the final verses of the Bhagavad Gita in chapter 18, that is from verses 73 to 78. So now what we have understood so far is that in verse 66 of chapter 18, Sri Krishna has actually concluded all his teachings of the Gita. Whatever knowledge he wanted to impart to Arjuna was completed or concluded with the verse 66 of chapter 18. So the balance verses of chapter 18 are basically the Lord summarizing certain points of the Gita, about the student of the Gita, about the teacher of the Gita, and what is the benefit of this Gita knowledge. So now we have stopped until verse number 72 in chapter 18, verse 72 in the last video. Now let us carry on with verse number 73. Now in verse number 73, Arjuna speaks here, and he acknowledges to Sri Krishna that he has understood the teachings very clearly, and that he is what we call very agreeable to put that teachings into practice. So two most important things, that we must understand the teachings and we must not then waste the teachings. It is not just for academic knowledge. We must put these teachings into our daily life, into practice. So let us see what Arjuna says in verse number 73. He says, O Lord, moha, this delusion, because the Lord did ask in the previous verse 72 from Arjuna that, have you heard this with single-minded attention? So that's the first thing the Lord wants Arjuna to confirm. Have you heard this, whatever I have imparted to you? Number two, has your delusion or moha, this delusion or moha, has it been, which is born out of ignorance. So therefore, what we know from here is that whatever delusion means our wrong understanding of life, about the goal of human life, about what is the purpose of this human birth, that delusion is the result of ignorance, lack of spiritual knowledge. And this is what Krishna wants to know. He's asking Arjuna, has your delusion born out of ignorance been dispelled? So Arjuna now confirms in verse number 73, O Lord, yes, moha, he says, moha nashtaha. My delusion, moha, has been nashtaha, has been destroyed. So what is this delusion? The delusion in our mind is that when we are overpowered by any negative quality, it can be anger, it can be sorrow, it can be shock, or whatever it is, it overpowers our capacity to think clearly. So we start making wrong decisions, we start taking wrong actions, and make the problem even more worse. So now Arjuna confirms that this delusion of not understanding the purpose of why I was on this battlefield, what was right, what was wrong. I was fighting for dharma, but yet I was prepared to throw my weapon down and run away from the battlefield. So now that delusion, my confusion over my duty, what needs to be done, it has been destroyed. I now understand very clearly what I need to do. Moha nashtaha has been destroyed. And when this delusion is destroyed from our intellect, because it is our intellect that makes the decisions for us, and when our intellect is overpowered by grief, by sorrow, by anger, etc., it loses its power to think rationally. So once this delusion has been destroyed by the right knowledge brings right thinking, and right thinking brings right action. So when the intellect, that delusion has been destroyed, smritir labda. Smritir means now my memory has been labda, has been regained, maya, by me. So that actually knowledge in Arjuna was there. He knew what is the right thing to do. We normally know what is the right thing to do. But when we are overpowered by anger, by greed, by lust, by jealousy, by so many things, then actually we know what is right to do, but because of this overpowering negative qualities, we lose our capacity to think rationally. So now Arjuna confirms, Moha Nashta, my delusion is destroyed. Smritir Labda, my memory, I know what is right, what is wrong now. That memory has come back, Maya, to me now, by me. So I remember clearly now what I'm supposed to do here on the battlefield. Because when Arjuna came to the battlefield, he was all prepared to fight. But when he saw his beloved relatives and what we call relatives and gurus, he became confused. What was the right thing to do? Should I kill them? Should I run away from the battlefield? What should I do? And how has this, what we call moha, been destroyed? Arjuna says in this word, Tvat prasadat. Tvat, O Lord, by your prasada, by your grace, because of your teachings, because of the knowledge you've imparted to me. So by your grace, O Lord, I'm thankful that now my delusion has been removed, my memory has come back, I'm very clear, I know what to do. So, what should he do now? Then Arjuna is also stating, Stitaha asmi. Asmi, I, stitaha, I stand firm on my feet. So if you remember or you recall in the very first chapter, Arjuna mentioned certain symptoms when he saw his beloved relatives and guru, and he realized that he had to kill them. He was overcome by weakness. He says, my skin is burning, my body is trembling, my knees are weak, and he had to actually sit down in his chariot because he felt overpowered by these emotions, and that affected him physically also. But now he says, Stitaha asmi, asmi, I stand, stitaha, I stand firm. I hold my Gandiva bow firmly in my hands. That same Gandiva bow which he had let it slip from his hands, now he picks it up, he knows what he needs to do. Gataha sandeha, my mind is free from all doubts. My mind is very clear, I know what to do. So both physically and mentally, Arjuna is prepared now. He knows what to do. And thus he declares to Krishna, Karishe, I shall follow Tava, your Vachanam, your instructions. So now I will follow exactly what you have taught me. I accept your teachings. They have cleared my confusion. They have taken away all my doubts. I'm physically strong, I'm mentally strong, I know what to do now. So this is the glory of the Gita knowledge. It removes our doubts, it removes our confusion, it makes us physically and mentally strong to take on all the challenges of life, because when all our doubts and confusion and all have been cleared, we know exactly what to do, what is the purpose of our life, what is the goal of human life. So he says, I will follow your teachings. So Arjuna has heard, he has listened, he has reflected, he has accepted, and he is now ready to put that knowledge into practice. So now, in the next verse 74, so in verse 74 now, remember Arjuna is on the battlefield with Krishna, but now the scene moves back to the palace in Hastinapura, where Sanjaya is relating to the blind king Dhritarashtra what is happening in the battlefield. So now in verse number 74 all the way up to 78, the concluding verses are spoken of by Sanjaya, who is the charioteer for the blind king Dhritarashtra. So, and Sanjaya has been gifted, if you remember, Sanjaya is sitting in Hastinapura, which is some 100 kilometers away from the battlefield. Sanjaya has been gifted by Ved Vyasa, Divya Drishti or divine sight. By sitting in Hastinapura, he can see exactly what is happening on the battlefield. And he's relating all this to the blind king Dhritarashtra. So now Sanjaya speaks. He says, iti imam. Thus, this Samvadam, if you recall, is the sacred dialogue. In chapter 10, verse 32, the Lord had said, Vada pravadatam maham. Any dialogue which contains a healthy discussion where two people talk or discuss things not because of ego or pride or to put each other down, but the discussion is to arrive at the highest truth. That Lord says, I am present there, and such a kind of discussion is called samvada. In fact, at the end of every chapter, the summary is like this: Sri Krishna Arjuna Samvade. Every chapter is a healthy, respectful dialogue between Krishna and Arjuna to ascertain that highest truth. So Sanjaya says, Iti imam samvadam. Thus, this sacred dialogue, aham, I, Sanjaya, ashrosam, I have heard this dialogue which was happening on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. Due to the grace of Vyasa, I have heard this whole dialogue and I have related it to you, O King. And between who is this sacred dialogue? Vasudevasya, the Sri Krishna, the son of Vasudeva, and Parthasya, Arjuna, the son of Pritha. Pritha is no other than Mother Kunti, so another name for her is Pritha, and Arjuna is called Parthasya, or son of Pritha. Pritha was the sister of Vasudeva, who was the father of Sri Krishna. So Arjuna here is also, he is addressed as Parthasya. He is also addressed here as Mahatmanaha, as a great soul. Why? Because Sanjaya says Arjuna has been so fortunate, he has been so blessed to receive these supreme teachings directly from Sri Krishna. So Sanjaya also has heard the same teachings and he's so overwhelmed with emotion, with so much of devotion. So he says, this dialogue is adbhutam, it's so wonderful, it is astonishing, it is so uplifting. I have no words to describe this dialogue. And as a result of hearing this, what we call dialogue between Krishna and Arjuna, Sanjaya says, Roma Harsham, my hair is standing on the end. It is a very uplifting experience. So Sanjaya is relating to the king what he is also going through. And then in verse number 75, he says he pays tribute. Sanjaya pays tribute, he pays homage. He says, due to Vyasa, due to the great sage Vyasa, prasadat, to the grace of Vyasa. Vyasa prasadat, due to the very grace of Vyasa who has blessed me with divya drishti, with this divine vision, that I am able to hear, I am able to see everything that is happening at the battlefield of Kurukshetra. So Sanjaya says, Aham Srutvan, I have heard Sakshat directly. So Sanjaya is saying, I have not heard this dialogue indirectly, but because of the grace of Vyasa, whatever Arjuna heard directly from Sri Krishna, I also heard that same dialogue, that same teachings directly from Sri Krishna. And what are these teachings? Imam Param Guhyam. Imam, this Param, most supreme Guhyam, secret. As you all know, chapter 9 was entitled Raja Vidya Raja Guhyam, the most supreme knowledge, the most supreme secret, because it is not available to everyone. So it is very subtle knowledge. Not everybody's mind is ready to receive such kind of knowledge, and that's why it is known as the supreme secret. So Vyasa is saying, I have heard this most supreme secret, Imam Param Guhyam. What is it? It is yoga. It is the yoga here means that supreme secret has got the power or the science of helping us to unite with the Supreme Being. Because yoga comes from the root word yuj, which means to unite our individual soul with the Supreme Soul. So powerful is this knowledge that it can give you total realization. And he says, he also mentions here that uh, what we call here in verse number 75 now, in verse number 75, he also mentions that this, what we call this dialogue that he has heard with the grace of Vyasa, he says, Krishna, the dialogue is directly from Sri Krishna. So it is not again indirect knowledge. He heard exactly what Arjuna heard, Sanjaya also heard. And who is Krishna? Yogeshwara. He is the Lord of Yoga. He is the master of Yoga. Yoga again here means not that sitting position where we do different exercises. Yoga means that power to unite. And Lord therefore is the master of Yoga. His teachings are so powerful that they help us to unite with him. And he says, Sanjaya says, I am so grateful, I am so fortunate that I have heard Swayam from this knowledge directly, Swayam from the Lord himself. Kathayata, speaking. So Sanjaya is very, very grateful that he also heard the same thing that Arjuna was hearing. Now in verse number 76. Now, Sanjaya has heard this. Can you imagine? He has heard directly that voice of Sri Krishna. Directly he has heard the teachings of Krishna. So you can understand he's in such an ecstatic, in such a uplifted mood, in such a devotional state now. So he addresses the blind king Dhritarashtra. He says, Rajan, O king Dhritarashtra, not only have I the good fortune of hearing directly from the Lord what Imam this Adbhutam, wonderful Samvadam, this wonderful dialogue between Keshava Arjuna, between Sri Krishna and Arjuna. And what is the glory of this dialogue? Is Punyam, it is sacred. And so this dialogue is just not an ordinary dialogue, it is a very sacred dialogue. And what else he says? He says, Samsmritya, Samsmritya. I am remembering and remembering again. I keep on recalling each and every word that Krishna has spoken. I cannot help but stop. I cannot stop to recall. I cannot help but keep on recalling this wonderful and sacred teachings of the Lord. And I'm so fortunate. I feel so blessed. I keep on recalling each and every nectar. Every word of Krishna is like nectar on my ears. And as a result, Rishyami Muhur Muhur, Rishyami, I rejoice, Muhur Muhur, again and again. So you can understand, how fortunate Sanjaya was and what an ecstatic and devotional state he was to recall the sacred dialogue between Krishna and Arjuna. Now that brings us to verse number 77. And in verse number 77, so here Sanjaya goes on to describe his state of what he's going through, what he's experiencing. He says again to Dhritarashtra, Rajan, O king, Mahan, so great is me Vishmaya, is my wonder. Tat, that upon seeing Tat here refers to the cosmic form that Lord Krishna revealed in chapter 11, if you remember. So not only he heard the dialogue, he's so fortunate, but he also saw the Vishwarupam that was revealed to Arjuna in chapter 11. He says, I also saw that wonder, and Samspritya, I am also remembering that form. Tears are falling from my eyes. I am so fortunate, I also got to witness that Vishwarupam also. Because everything that was happening on the battlefield, Sanjaya was gifted by Vyasa to see and to hear everything that was happening there. So Sanjaya describes this cosmic form as Hari. Hari again is another name for Lord Krishna. He says Hari Adyat Putam, an extremely wonderful Rupam, form of Hari, that form of Krishna I also witness, that with many arms, with many heads, etc. If you recall, Arjuna described that in chapter 11. And now comes the concluding verse number 78. Now, generally, when we conclude the teachings of the Gita, we will recite this verse twice. So, let me first explain what Sanjay is saying, then we will conclude by reciting this verse twice. So, now Sanjaya is giving the conclusion about this entire what we call dialogue between Krishna and Arjuna. Remember, the war is not over because this dialogue happened on the 10th day of the battle. What happened on the 10th day of the Mahabharata battle? Bhishma Pita fell on a bed of arrows which was shot by Arjuna. Arjuna shot a number of arrows and Bhishma Pita fell on this bed of arrows. Sanjay was so shocked he went back to relate the whole story to the blind king Dhritarashtra. So the war took 18 days. There were still 8 more days to go in the war. So now Sanjay is giving his conclusion about what he has heard and when he was given this Divya Drishti. So he says, now keep in mind the war is not over, so we do not actually know who won at that time. But now Sanjay is giving his conclusion about the whole war now. He's saying, Yatra Yogeshwara, Yatra on whoever or wherever or whoever side, Yogeshwara, where Krishna stands on whichever side, Yogeshwara is Lord of Yoga, Krishna. Yatra Yogeshwara Krishna, on whoever side Krishna stands. Now, you may remember the beautiful story before the Mahabharata war started, when Arjuna went to seek Krishna's help. At the same time, Duryodhan, the eldest son of Dhritarashtra, also went to seek Krishna's help in this war. So when both of them arrived, this was a story told in Mahabharata, when both of them arrived at Krishna's palace, Krishna saw them coming, but he pretended to sleep. Arjuna went in, being a very humble and a disciple of Krishna, he who revered Krishna, he sat at the feet of Krishna. Duryodhan, being an arrogant, proud person, he went and sat in the hall where the head of Krishna was. So then Krishna opened his eyes, and of course when you open your eyes, the first thing you see is the person sitting at your feet, which is Arjuna. And then he got up, he turned around and he saw Duryodhan. So both of them told him they came to seek his help. Krishna says, either of you can choose one of these things I can help you with. One is, I have a whole army. Krishna had his own army, one whole battalion. So either you choose the whole army or you can choose me. Either or option. But if you choose me, I will not raise a single weapon. I will not fight in this war. I will not actively take any part in this war, but I will stand by your side. Now, then Krishna says, since when I opened my eyes first, I saw Arjuna, I will give him the first choice. So, of course, Duryodhan was shattered because he knew that Arjuna will definitely take the whole army. Why choose, if you want to choose between Krishna and Krishna's whole army, and Krishna said he won't even lift a weapon, then what's the point of choosing Krishna? But instead Arjuna said, oh Lord, I only want you by my side. I don't want your army. I just want you by my side. And then Duryodhan of course said, okay, I'll take your whole army. And that's how the Kauravas ended up with 11 battalions. They had 10 battalions. One extra battalion came from Sri Krishna, total 11. And Pandavas had 7 battalions, which all have given that explanation in the first chapter. So that is how Krishna came to become Arjuna's charioteer. So now Sanjay is saying, Yatra Yogeshwara Krishna, on whoever side Krishna stands. He says, Yatra Partha Danudara, on wherever there is Partha, meaning Arjuna. What type of Arjuna? Not the weak, the shattered, the without motivation Arjuna we saw in chapter 1, chapter 2. But the one we saw in chapter 8 who picked up his bow and arrow, his physical body, his mental strength there, and told Krishna, I will do as per your bidding. So he says, Yatra Partho Danudara, the Arjuna who has taken up his bow and arrow. And this means you and me. Meaning what? Meaning not that we should take bow and arrow and start shooting everybody, but meaning we should not give up our duties. We should not surrender, abandon, or avoid doing our duties. Taking up the bow and arrow for a soldier means doing his duties. To us, it means taking up all our duties and responsibilities. Do them with the right attitude of surrender to the Lord. So, Yatra Yogeshwara Krishna, Yatra Partho Dhanudhara. What happens when Krishna is on that side, when Krishna is in our hearts, when Krishna is on our sides, and we also must play our part. Like they say, God helps those who help themselves. So we also must take up and perform the action. We must take up our duties. We must take up the challenges. So where Krishna is there and where we are prepared to do our part, he says, Tatra, there on that side. So what happens now? See, here Krishna represents Jnana Yoga, the knowledge. Arjuna with the bow, picking up the bow and arrow, represents Karma Yoga, the attitude that I will do my duty, I will take up all my responsibilities. So when Jnana Yoga is there, Karma Yoga is there, what happens? Sanjaya says, Dhruva, firmly that is established. It is established firmly that there will be Sri, there will be good fortune. Good fortune here means not that you become a multi-billionaire, but it means in the form of spiritual growth. There is clarity in your mind, there is spiritual growth. Number two, there is Vijaya. Definitely there is victory. So there is spiritual growth, there is victory, meaning all the negative obstacles and impurities will be removed. And there is Bhuti. Bhuti means the power to progress in the right direction. And there is Niti, there is virtue. So wherever Krishna stands and wherever we are prepared to do our duties by following the advice of Krishna, Sanjaya says there will be Shri, good fortune in the form of spiritual growth. There is Vijaya, there's victory, meaning you will defeat all the negative obstacles and impurities in your mind. Bhuti, there is power, there is perseverance to progress in the right direction. There is Niti, there are virtues. You will follow all the good values, humility, compassion, love, kindness, and all that, respect. So non-violence, etc. So Niti, virtue. And Sanjaya concludes by saying, Mama Mati, this is my conviction. So telling Dhritarashtra that your sons, Krishna is not on their side. So they are going to lose this battle. They are doomed already. Even though the battle is not over, Sanjaya is giving the blind king his conclusion about the battle. And therefore he says it is the Pandavas, because Krishna is on their side, Arjuna is on their side, victory is also on their side. So he is trying to also warn the king, you better stop this battle, but now it is too late, because his son Duryodhan, Dhritarashtra's, the blind king's son Duryodhan, is very adamant to carry on till the end of this battle. So thus ends this dialogue between Sri Krishna and Arjuna in the sacred text known as Bhagavad Gita, and as is our tradition, we will recite this verse twice. Chapter 18, verse 78, the concluding verse, let us now recite together. Yatra Yogeshwara Krishno, Yatra Partho Dhanudhara, Tatra Sri Vijayo Bhutir, Dhruvani Tirmatir Mama. Yatra Yogeshwara Krishno, Yatra Partho Dhanudhara, Tatra Sri Vijayo Bhutir, Dhruvani Tirmatir Mama. We will read now the concluding verse that ends this chapter. Om Tat Saditi Srimad Bhagavad Gita Supanishatsu Brahma Vidyayam Yoga Shastre Sri Krishna Arjun Samvade Moksha Sannyasa Yogo Nama Astadasodhyaya. Hari Om Tat Sat, Hari Om Tat Sat, Hari Om Tat Sat. Sri Krishna Arpanam Astu Shubham Bhuyat Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kansa Chanuramardanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadguru. Hari Om. And may all of you be blessed by the study of the Gita. Wishing each and every one of you all the best of good health and peace of mind. Hari Om Tat Sat.